Steven. All right. Anyway, um, tonight I think I want to focus on uh, focus. What I mean by that is the priorities in keeping the mitzvot, the will and commandments of God. When one is just beginning to endeavor in observing God's commandments, sometimes it can be quite confusing. We are thrown into a sea of knowledge and of actions and rituals that may not necessarily seem very form how do you say organized in an intelligible manner. We might not know the difference between what is regarded as simply a rabbinic decree, a custom, or a direct commandment of God from the Torah, the law of Moses. So in this video I want to explain, with regard to some basic daily commandments, what the difference is between fulfilling your Torah obligation and your rabbinic obligation. Ideally, we will be doing them all. And as we increase in knowledge of Torah Hashem, the law of God, we will more and more be enabled to fulfill them all. But to begin with, everybody in different ways and in different areas of Jewish law, they're not able to fulfill everything. We're all learning something new all the time. At least we should be. But most people, when they begin with like the laws of prayer, the blessings, kashrut, the laws of forbidden and permitted foods. So with regard to daily prayer, I think we should begin with Kriyat Shema. This is the recitation of the three sections from the Torah that we are to recite twice every day at specific times. Now, if you will find in a Jewish prayer book where one recites Kriyat Shema, the recitation of the Shema passages, you will see that they follow a whole chapter, more than a chapter, several pages of different excerpts from the book of Tehillim, and also blessings that are to be said leading up to the recitation of Shema. But what happens when a person is just now beginning to learn? Maybe the only Siddur prayer book he has on hand is in Hebrew and he's struggling through the Hebrew. Or maybe he even has an English one and he's able to read that fluently, but he's not yet managed his time or gotten used to managing his time in a way that he can fulfill his obligations without interfering with work or picking up his children and the like. So what do you do when you're pressed with time in such situations? So what I want to do is clarify what you have to do absolutely in order to fulfill your Torah obligation, and what ideally we will do and what is simply custom. Now, straight up, the Torah obligation is that you recite at specific times of the day, as mentioned earlier, in the morning and in the evening, night, these passages from the Torah. Those passages are Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 through 9, Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 13 through 21, and Numbers chapter 15, verses 37 through 41. Now, what you can do if you don't have a Siddur, you can simply, if you don't have a Jewish prayer book, simply find these passages. I will provide them, God willing, afterwards in a transcript. I will post that either to my Facebook or blog. I'll make sure it's on Facebook. In any case, and what you can do is go through the translation that you have available of the Torah. I'm sure you can find it online if you're listening, and take out these sections, put them together one after another, Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9, chapter 11, 13 through 21, in that order, and simply read that, okay? Have that on hand, print it out, and have it beside your bed, or fold it up, put it in your wallet, stick it in your pocket, and when you're on the run, if you're not yet used to saying the blessings leading up to this recitation, at least begin saying this. Better to say it in English than in Hebrew, better to say it in English any day than in Hebrew if you don't understand the Hebrew and you're not going to be taking it to heart. Now, as I said before, This selection of passages from the Torah are to be said twice daily, in the morning and at night. Now, there is a specific time at which one can fulfill this obligation at its earliest, and a time when one can fulfill this obligation in the morning at its latest. Same case in the night. There is an earliest point in time when one can fulfill the obligation to read these passages at night, and then there is the latest. So, at night, the time at which one can fulfill this obligation begins with the appearance of 3 medium-sized stars. You can find the specific time when this occurs in your city by visiting websites such as myzmanim.com. That's myzmanim.com. Just type in your city or area code, and you should be able to find these specific times that I'm explaining now. So the time at which one can, at the earliest point in the day, fulfill his obligation for the nighttime recitation of Shema is, again, at the appearance of 3 medium-sized stars. This in Hebrew is called Sleth HaKochavim, or in Ashkenazi pronunciation, Seis HaKochavim. And then the latest time at which one can fulfill the nighttime recitation of these laws is up until dawn. Dawn is in reference to the first faint bit of sunlight that appears on the horizon. And you can also find this on the same website, myzmanim.com. If you're in a very rural area, you can pretty much see for yourself on a clear night without using such a website. Or if you're, as in old times, so used to rising in the morning and going to bed at night at such specific hours, you get used to the time, so that in the infrequent case of cloudy skies throughout the Middle East, not so common. So when it does occur, you know pretty much when it starts. But in modern times with light pollution, it's kind of hard to tell. So using such a website is necessary unless you're in a rural area. So dawn is the latest one can fulfill his Torah obligation for the recitation of the Shema passages. This in Hebrew, dawn, the earliest part of dawn, the faintest appearance of the sunlight on the horizon, is called in Hebrew Amud HaShahar, Amud HaShahar, or Amud HaShachar, and it's also called Alot HaShahar, or Alos HaShachar. In the morning, okay, you can fulfill your obligation to recite these passages at the earliest time, beginning at dawn, exactly when you have passed up your opportunity to fulfill the nighttime obligation. Then you are able to fulfill the daytime obligation at its earliest point. Likewise, at the first appearance of the faintest bit of sunlight, Amud HaShahar, or Alot HaShahar. Again, don't forget to check with websites such as myzmanim.com. The latest time at which a person can fulfill this obligation in the morning is called Sof Zman Kriyat Shema. Alright? Sof Zman Kriyat Shema. Sof Zman Kriyat Shema. I'm not used to saying it that way, but your ears should get adjusted to it. This is 3 hours into the day. Not 3 hours from sunrise, but 3 hours from the dawn, okay? And when we say 3 hours, that could be roughly 3 hours, like 60 minutes in the standard sense, but what it actually means is 3 hours of a 12-hour amount of time, starting from dawn until sunset. So you take that frame of time and divide it into 12 equal parts, so that each of those 12 parts is 1 hour. And when you do that, taking into account that daytime and nighttime are at different lengths throughout the seasons of the year, so at sometimes in the year it may be nearly exactly an hour, and sometimes a bit over. All of this is taken into account on websites such as myzmanim.com. So there you have it. This is the most basic way to fulfill your obligation from the Torah, to recite Shema. All right. Women throughout the Jewish world typically also recite Shema, but technically they are not obligated to do so. So if you're a woman and you're pressed for time, and this should not be your priority. First, fulfill those things that you are obligated to do, and then do this. In modern times, I don't know. I don't know your lives, so I'm not even gonna say. But men, this you have to do, Kriyat Shema, if you are able. If you simply had no knowledge before, that's a different case. But make the time. It's not difficult to do. Just keep it on hand, print it out, put it in your pockets. Now, as time goes on, as you get used to doing this, you get used to setting aside enough time to fulfill this obligation, you can start adding the blessings that precede and follow this recitation. And these are found in your average Siddur, your average Jewish prayer book. One other simple point I'd like to make regarding the times at which one can fulfill this obligation is that in the nighttime, though you have from the appearance of 3 medium-sized stars until dawn, although this is the case, the Mosaic court, the Beit Din Gadol from ancient times, they decreed that one should fulfill this obligation before the exact middle point of the nighttime. They did this in order to distance one from waiting to just the last minute, and then something comes up where they forget and they end up not fulfilling the obligation at all. So technically we should fulfill the nighttime recitation of Shema before exact midnight. Again, when midnight is in the context of Jewish law is not always going to be the same as what you find on your clock. You can find when this exact midnight is on myzmanim.com. If you waited till after that time, you should still say it because you are still able to fulfill your Torah obligation. You did not violate your Torah obligation by waiting so late. You simply violated a rabbinic decree. So just try not to do that again. All right. It's not the end of the world. Alrighty. So moving on to prayer, tefillah. One fulfills his Torah obligation for daily prayer by 3 types of prayer. We all know that the standard text for Jewish prayer did not always exist. Abraham didn't pray it, Moses didn't pray it, Joshua didn't pray it, King David didn't pray it. We do have the tradition, and there are indications in the Bible that they did have set times of prayer, but this text didn't yet exist. The text was formulated according to Jewish teaching. Thank you. So I'm not currently in Israel. So we know from Jewish tradition that the basic formulated format of Jewish prayer was instituted during the time of Ezra HaSofer, during the time of Ezra the scribe. You see in the book of Ezra in the Bible that at that time there was a problem of assimilation into the Babylonians in his generation, and Ezra was a leader even, of a call to the Jewish people, all those who love God, to separate themselves from idolaters and return to the Torah and to return to the Holy Land. But being a practical and reasonable leader, as he was, and as any leader should be, he took into consideration the reality of their situation. And that was that the masses of the people of Israel at that time were no longer fluent, those people of Israel in that land, in Babylon, Iraq, they were no longer fluent in Hebrew. They were also not fluent in the native language there, but rather they spoke a unique dialect, which was simply a mixture and a degeneration of various different languages mixed together, including Hebrew and the other languages. Sound familiar? So what he did was formulate a prayer for the Jewish people that would establish in their mouths a beautiful prayer to God in a way that fulfills their Torah obligation to pray, and also in a manner that they can do so eloquently with a nice language. without stuttering and without grammatical confusion. You can fulfill the obligation to say this prayer that he established, which we now know as the Amidah or the Shemona Esrei. You can fulfill this reading it in any language. There is no violation of anything, not rabbinic or Torah violation, to say this prayer in any language. But, as I said in the beginning, I really want to focus on priorities in this video in pressing times, or when one simply doesn't have on hand the tools, Sidur for example, to fulfill his obligation. He doesn't yet have this prayer memorized, let's say. So what can you do in such a case if you don't have a Sidur on hand? So just remember that you can fulfill your Torah obligation for this prayer by three factors. They are that daily prayer must consist of praise to the Creator, so you direct thoughts, words of praise to the Most High, and requests, and thanksgiving. You do those three things, even in your own words, and you fulfill the Torah obligation. This is not to replace or to make light of the rabbinically instituted Jewish liturgy, but when one doesn't have on hand, again, then it is better, without doubt, to say it in your own words than to be left empty-handed and not maintain your connection to the Most High. You should also know that the sages of Israel took into consideration those people who were just beginning to learn Hebrew, or were likewise pressed for time, but did have to their advantage more than just knowledge of those three basic factors that help you fulfill your obligation: praise, request, and thanksgiving. And what I mean by that is they instituted, together with the full standing prayer, a tefillah qasara, a short prayer, a shortened version of the Amidah, a short version of the Shemona Esrei. You can find this on my website, segavia.tripod.com. You can also find it in one of my videos on YouTube. I'm not going to stop here. Any of you should feel free to... I'll just post it on my Facebook, God willing, I will remember to do that, and you can see what I'm referring to. I've also already translated it, so that shouldn't be a problem. You guys feel free to translate any of these things to any other languages that you know in order to help other people. Now, another matter of priorities in a more general sense has to do with serving God in the proper manner, keeping his mitzvot in the proper manner, with a proper perspective. And that is, while all of our praise and devotion and good deeds should be done for the sake and glory of the Most High, for God's sake, out of worship of him, we should also know that the end of our worship, God's reason for us to worship him, isn't because he has need of our worship. He is sufficient and perfect in himself. He has no need for our praise. He's not someone with low self-esteem that he needs to hear how great he is, but rather all of his commandments are for the benefit of mankind. And therefore, to become so consumed with fulfilling one's religious duties to God to the most minute detail, to the extent that you may be falling behind with how you fulfill your duties to other individuals, fulfilling your the commandments that God has given us in relation to other people. If you're doing that, then you do not have your priorities straight, and actually we are doing contrary to the will of God. So it kind of makes all the energy invested in overemphasizing the worship of God in the more ritualistic manner, kind of makes it all empty when we focus on that to the detriment of the commandments between ourselves and our fellow men. So also this should be regarded as a priority. Our time that we invest in worshiping God and doing commandments that relate only between ourselves and the Creator should not be, should not be just find another word. Just got to refresh my English. It shouldn't be to the detriment of doing good to other men, to other people. This is summed up in a very common phrase known among Torah observant Jews, Derech Eretz Qatman LeTorah, that basic etiquette, decency, politeness, it precedes Torah. So keeping Torah without basic manners and politeness, basic human decency that should be expected of all people, whether scholar or not. If someone is learning Torah and they lack that, then their Torah is not only missing a major part of what the Torah really is, but it also becomes a desecration of God's name. Because while acting all religious and focusing so much on your relationship with God to the detriment of other people, you make it seem as though that this is the will of God. Heaven forbid that it is. But when people perceive another person that way, then it kind of pushes them away from God as well. At least the God that you claim to be following, even if you're misrepresenting it. So that should be a priority. Priority to consider other people, and priority to fulfill and gain knowledge of our Torah obligations before delving into the minutia, the extremely small details of how to fulfill rabbinic decrees. So with that, maybe you guys can ask questions. Hello, testing. I'm finished. How are you guys doing? Talk to me. Any questions? Good lecture. Do you want to bring up any other topic? Any of you guys have any questions about what we mentioned, or want to ask about something else? Hello? Okay, so I'll get you that. Don't know if links work here, but in any case, this is it, myzmanim.com. Oh, I'll just go ahead and give you guys a link to the short version of the Shmona Esrei. I gotta pull it up off YouTube. If you can't come up with some other topic that you don't want to talk about, then give me a second. I'll try to think of something else to talk about. In the meantime, okay, so let's see. If you want, we can just make our way through some of the laws of tefillah, some of the laws of prayer, and I will just read and clarify some of those halachot, some of those laws as we get to them, translating them. And if you guys decide after hearing that, thank you. If you guys decide after hearing a little bit of that that you actually want to know more about something else, just bring it up. I think that there are other very important things to discuss, but the laws of prayer are along the lines of what we've discussed now, so I guess it's fitting. I think so, anyway. I'll go ahead and do that. This will give you the history of the Shmona Esrei, of the standard Jewish prayer. Right, I'm reading from Mishne Torah, the codification of Talmudic law by Maimonides, the Rambam. You can find this in English on Chabad.com or .org. I don't know which one it is. And you can get it all together from Rav Asher Meza. Just contact him about that. So I'll begin. Hilchot Tefillah u'Birkat Kohanim, the laws of prayer and the Aaronic blessing of the priests. Yesh bichlelon shte mitzvot aseh. There are in it 2 positive mitzvot. Cut. How long do you want me to be doing this?
Well, as long as you want. I mean, typically the class goes till 7.
7?
Well, I mean, 9 Eastern
Okay,
time.
so this would be 9 according to your clock also?
Right, so 20 minutes more.
20 minutes more? Okay, but say it.
Let me say hi to the audience. I'm here with my friend.
You guys falling asleep?
Yusef.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alright.
He's out of here. Let's see what you wrote. All right. So, do you want to talk about that? Well, I'm just going to read through the laws. All right. But I'll go ahead and say that's closer to the truth than what many people have the misconception of regarding prostration. It is often said that a person cannot prostrate on stone unless they're very righteous, or that you can't prostrate on stone in public, but maybe you can privately, or something along those lines, if the person's not saying that you can't prostrate at all. But none of those are correct. Truth is very much like what Wafa has said, that an Adam Hashuv, someone who is an important individual, is not allowed to prostrate unless they are as righteous as Joshua. Now, this law is given in the context of prostrating in tahanun, in the supplicatory prayers, Yeah, I do know why. The reason is because, as I just said, this prohibition is specifically with regard to prostrating during the prayers of supplication, what's known in Hebrew as tahanun. And this prayer is not the central prayer itself. This is not the Shmona Esrei, but this is what follows immediately after the Shmona Esrei. And when you're praying with a community, with a minyan, first, when you finish reciting the Shmona Esrei, you will wait, stand in your place, and then they will begin the repetition of this prayer. It will then all be said out loud by a prayer leader, called a Hazan, or a Shaliach Tzibur. Now, when he finishes his repetition, then everybody does this prayer. Ideally, we're supposed to then sit upon the ground and prostrate ourselves. Most Jewish communities sit in their seats and then kind of fall forward onto the table on their arm. Now, the reason this is prohibited to an important person, specifically in this part of the prayer, in the supplicatory part, I can't speak English anymore. The reason is because supplications are the deep requests of one's heart, and if a leader of a congregation, the leader of that community, makes a public prayer, everybody sees him praying and he's supplicating, and then they see that his prayer wasn't answered, well then it could be misperceived by the community or by certain individuals in the community that God wasn't faithful to hear his prayer, because this person, this person, he's a righteous individual, he's the leader of the community, he fell on his face before God just like Joshua did, and yet God didn't answer his prayer. So in order to prevent a desecration of God's name, a potential desecration of God's name, therefore the sages of Israel prohibited such a person from making public supplications. As the son of the Rambam points out in his book Hamaspik La'uvdei Hashem, why it just disappeared. I see like a movie on where my face is supposed to be, but that's okay. As the son of the Rambam pointed out in his book Hamaspik La'uvdei Hashem, this prohibition doesn't apply to prostrating in the context of praise or thanks to the Almighty. So if he wants to bow during Aleinu L'Shabeach, which is a customary prayer said after the obligatory prayers, or if he wants to bow in the Shemona Esrei, if he wants to bow during the standing prayer, which comes before the supplicatory prayers, then he's able to. That prohibition does not apply. Any other questions on your minds before we continue with reading the laws of prayer? Five, four, three, two, one. Okay. So, the laws of prayer in the Mishne Torah. יש בכללן שתי מצוות עשה. It includes the laws of prayer. They include two proactive commandments. These are two commandments that tell us something that we should do. לעבוד אדוני בתפילה בכל יום. That we should serve the transcendent one, God, with prayer every day. Shniya, the second, is levorech kohanim et Yisrael b'chol yom. That the kohanim, the descendants of Aaron, the brother of Moses, from their paternal side, from their father's side, they should every single day bless the people of Israel. I'll go ahead and say, though this second commandment that is included in this book, though it's at the end of the laws of prayer, I'll go ahead and say that it's important to know, if any of you guys are Kohanim, and if any of you guys are Kohens, descendants of Aaron, that this commandment applies also outside of the land of Israel, although the vast majority of the Jewish people don't do it outside the land of Israel. Even though even such great leaders of the Jewish world, including in the Ashkenazi world, said that it should be instituted and done outside of the land of Israel, such as the Vilna Gaon, the Gra. But of course, as with many things, it went unheeded. Unfortunately, we know that at the end of the day, what happens is what goes is what finds favor in the eyes of the masses, and usually the masses are, if they don't educate themselves, they're usually easily led by the ignorant, or, if not ignorant, the arrogant, those who care more about other things rather than doing God's will. So if you're a Kohen, you should know that blessing Israel every day, saying the Aaronic blessing, as commanded in the Torah, is a Torah commandment every day, throughout the whole world. Alright. And the clarification of these two proactive commandments are in the following chapters. The first halacha, the first law. It is a proactive commandment that one should pray every day. As it is stated, and you shall serve the transcendent one, your venerable authority. You shall serve the Lord your God. So according to the oral transmission of the way in which the written Torah is to be understood, according to that transmission passed along from generation to generation in the generations of the Sanhedrin, of the Mosaic court, we know that when it says here, and you shall serve the transcendent one, your venerable authority, where it says there, you shall serve, this is in reference to the service of the heart, which is prayer. So we've learned from the oral transmission that this service commanded in the book of Exodus chapter 23 verse 25 is a commandment to pray. And as it is stated, you shall serve him with all your heart. The sages said, what is the service of the heart? The service of heart is prayer. And the number of prayers, the amount of times one prays in the day, is not from the Torah. So that we pray specifically 3 times a day, or 5 times a day, or say 100 blessings a day, this isn't a Torah instituted obligation. From the Torah, simply that one must pray at least once a day, and as we will see in the continuation, this is fulfilled by saying, with intention of course, words of praise, request, and thanksgiving to the Creator. ولا مشنه التفلا هزت من التوراة وإن التفلا زمن قبوع min Torah. All right. And the repetition of this prayer isn't from the Torah, and also the specific time at which one is supposed to say this prayer, specified times, as we do have, this obligation is not from the Torah. The second halakha. لفيخ, therefore, نشيم وعبوديم حيوين بتفillah. Therefore, women and even the partially converted servants of the people of Israel, even they are obligated in prayer. These women and the partially converted servants of the people of Israel are obligated in prayer because prayer is a positive, a proactive commandment that is not dependent on it's not dependent on a specific time frame. Women, females, and those who enter the covenant of Israel by means of servitude, they are only obligated in commandments that are not dependent upon specific times, unless, of course, the Torah gives a very clear exception. So like shaking a lulav on Sukkot, or wearing tefillin, these types of things, they're dependent upon a specific time, whether that time is the daylight part of the day or a 7-period time period. These things are only obligatory upon men and not upon women and those who are members of the covenant through servitude. Rather, the obligation of this commandment is as the following. שיהיה אדם מתפלל ומתחנן בכל יום ומגיד שבחה של הקדוש ברוך הוא ואחר כך שואל צרכו שהוא צריך להם בבקשה ובתחינה. So the following is the way in which one fulfills this commandment. שיהיה אדם מתפלל ומתחנן, that a person should be praying and supplicating every day, saying the praise of the Holy One, blessed be He, and afterwards ask his needs that he needs, make requests of his needs with supplication and requests. And afterwards, give, and afterwards, after he does these two things, after he makes requests and says the praise of God and asks his needs with requests and supplications, after this he gives praise and thanksgiving to the Transcendent One for the goodness that the Almighty bestowed upon him. Each and every person does this according to his strength, according to his ability. So you don't have to say it in beautiful words in Hebrew or even in English, so long as you express these longings and these expressions of gratefulness and thanksgiving and praise to the Almighty according to your ability, you fulfill your Torah obligation. If he was a person who was used to doing this, he would multiply in the amount of his supplications and requests. And if he was a person of limited verbal expression, if he was somebody who was not so eloquent, he would speak according to his ability and at any time that he wants. So here it's giving the Torah commandment, not the rabbinic, and then it's going to go on to explain how we got the Torah, how we got the rabbinic institution as we have it today in the Siddur, in the prayer book. That will appear in the continuation of this chapter and the next. And likewise the number of the prayers. So also, just as the words, the substance of the prayers wasn't a fixed wording, but it had to include praise, requests, and supplications, so also the number of prayers, it wasn't fixed, but it was dependent upon the ability of each person. If he had time, he would pray more. If he didn't have time, he'd pray less. If he was weak or he was distracted, he wouldn't pray. But he would make sure that he would pray at least once according to his ability. There were those who would pray just once in the day. And then there were those who would pray many times in the day. And every person would be praying in the direction of the Miqdash, in the direction of the temple of God, which is in Jerusalem, from whatever place he would be at. And thus was the situation always. And this was the situation always from the time of Moses until Azra. And this you can see indicated throughout the Bible. You see in several places in the Bible that they would be praying in the direction of the sanctuary, in the direction of the temple. Because of the exile of Israel in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, the wicked. The people of Israel assimilated into Faras, that's Persia, mainly in the area of modern Iran, at Wayawan, and Greece, and in the remainder of the nations. And were born unto them children in the lands of the nations. And these same children had their language confused. And the language of each and every person became mixed into various different languages. And whenever this person would speak, the people who were descendants, second generation or more, among those who had begun to assimilate in the nations, whenever they would try to speak, they weren't able to speak all their needs in any one language without shibushim, without shibush, without confusion or mistakes. Shanna Amar, as it is stated in the book of Nehemiah, in the Bible, in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 13, verse 24, as it states there, Uvnehem hasim medaber ashdodith, enom makirim medaber yehudith. And their sons would speak half Ashdodith, which was a non-Israelite language, and they didn't know how to speak Yehudith, the language of the Jews. And they weren't able also to speak the regular language of all the different peoples, but a mix. And this is what led up to the development of the Shmona Esrei, the centralized prayers we have it today. And because of this, when one of them would pray, his tongue would be shortened, meaning it would be restricted or withheld from asking its desires. It would also be restricted from saying the praise of the Holy One, blessed be He, Bilshon HaKodesh, in the Hebrew language. So they weren't able to do this in the Hebrew language, not even in the other languages. So they weren't able to do this in Hebrew or in other language unless they mixed the languages. And once Ezra and his Bith-Din and the Sanhedrin, the Mosaic court of his generation, saw that this was the situation, so when they saw this, they took a stand and established an edict that 18 blessings would be organized one after the other in order to give them structure and enable them to express their praises, requests, and thanksgiving to God. Sholosh Rishonoth. The first three of these 18 blessings, Shevach Ladonoi. So the first three blessings of the Shmona Esrei are Shevach Ladonoi. Shevach means praise to God. V'sholosh Ahronoth, and the last 3 of the 18 blessings of the Shemona Esrei, of the standing prayer, are Hodiyah, meaning thanksgiving. So the last 3 are thanksgiving. The first 3 are praise. Lemsa'iyath, and the middle ones, יש בהן השאלות כל הדברים שהן, כמו עובד לכל חפשי איש ואיש, ולצורכי הציבור כולם. So the middle blessings in the Shemona Esrei are not praise and not thanksgiving, but are according to various topics of the needs of the individual and the community as a whole. So it looks like we wrapped it up.
Just keep on if you want.
I think we've done enough. Do you guys have any questions? Hello, anybody awake? How many people are here? Wake up. Oh, we got a minyan. Yalla. All right.